Before we get into today's show, I want to invite you into a brand new free community that I've created called, the Think Unbroken community. If you are lost, if you're struggling, if you just need a little bit more support right now, especially with how crazy the world is, I invite you to come and join the free community, where not only is it a place to connect with other people, your peers, and myself who are on this healing journey, but I'll also be hosting a live monthly Q&A coaching session, again, for free. Communities for free, access is for free, 1 time per month coaching for free. All of this just because I really want to create a deeper connection and bond with you, the listeners of this podcast, who I appreciate more than I could ever tell you. All you need to do is just click the link in the description of today's episode, or go over to thinkunbrokenpodcast.com and click the link for community. Come and join us. I'll see you there. You're listening to the Think Unbroken podcast, and I'm your host, Michael Unbroken. I'm an author, speaker, coach, and advocate for adult survivors of childhood trauma and abuse. In this podcast, you will learn how to transform your trauma into triumph, turn breakdowns into breakthroughs, and go from victim to being the hero of your own story. You can learn more at thinkunbrokenpodcast.com, and of course, check us out on Apple Podcasts and Spotify at Think Unbroken Podcast. One of the things that I think that we have to really address is the reality that there are a lot of tropes in mental health that I don't think really stand true any longer. And yet we're continually told that this is the way to heal, this is the way to change, this is the way to improve your mental well-being. And yet here we are doing the same things over and over and over again to no resolve. And that's why I'm excited for today's episode with my great friend Dana Hargus to talk about exactly how we can create real and lasting transformation in our lives by healing our nervous system. And not only that, but understanding the other limitations that we're faced with in the world in today's scope of mental health. If you are struggling, if you're lost, if you've listened to 998 episodes of Think Unbroken and you're still like, I don't know what to do, listen to this episode because it's going to be super powerful. Dana, my friend, thank you so much for being here and welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
If someone is listening right now and they are feeling inclined to stay for the old episode, why should they stay and listen to every second that we talk today?
I think that I have had a lifetime, an adult lifetime of 30 plus years of dealing with mental health issues from the perspective of an educator, the parent of difficult, hard, kids that came from hard places, and then also a mental health counselor. And I feel like the way that I see mental health is unique and that it offers real healing for the whole person.
Let's get into that. Why is it unique, right? What is it that you have seen, and obviously with a tremendous amount of experience, personal background, and all of the things that anyone could really use to leverage of being an expert, what is it that you see that you think we're missing or isn't talked about, or you have this unique perspective? What does that look like and where does it come from?
Well, I think it comes from years of looking at what doesn't work. As you're in this world, and I have had foster children that I later adopted. And like I said, I was an educator mostly of children in special education, often worked with kids who we would call emotionally disturbed or delinquents. And then I moved into this mental health field. So I tend to see myself as a problem solver. It's like I'm interested in why I've always been intrigued, even as a child, as to why everybody doesn't solve problems. Because you look at a problem and you see what it is and you're like, what do we need to do to fix this? How do we change it? That's my perspective. And so when I watch people just sit under a problem and never change it, I think, why don't you do something different? Even if it's just, I'm late all the time. It's like, why don't you try to figure out how to not be late? So all these years of looking at things and thinking, this does not work, and watching the brokenness that's created by our society. Like, we look at medication And the side effects of that medication are unbelievable. And the fact that we would hand it to a child is like, at least an adult gets to make a decision. I see that this pill could cause homicide, suicide, anger, rage, constipation, the list just goes. It could cause a heart attack. It could cause these things, but I'm choosing to take it anyway. Well, a child doesn't have that luxury of getting to say, this doesn't make me feel good. I'm not going to do this. So when I look at all the things we do, I think something has to be different. And I feel like I've spent the last at least 35 years of my life thinking what needs to be different and how do I make it different? And that's where I am today, of going, we don't need to be considering these options. We need to be looking at how to fix a problem. Our society is just full of Band-Aids. We just slap a Band-Aid on it with no thought of getting to a real solution. It's like we don't even believe there are solutions. We just believe that if we just slap more and more Band-Aids and stitch this up a little and look at it from this perspective, then we can survive. And my goal is not survival. My goal is healing and thriving and living and loving and being joyful. I guess the most grandiose of my thoughts is I want to change the way we do mental health. Like it's one thing to look at something and say it's wrong, but it's another thing to have options on what we're going to do differently.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I created this, the effort and energy of writing the books, the podcast, the speaking on stages has always been just because I felt like there has to be something different. I mean, I watched my mother literally kill herself on prescription drugs, watched my grandmother walk down that same path, watched the people in my neighborhood do the same things. And I would always just think to myself, and as a child, I remember having these moments of looking at their experiences and being like, this doesn't work. Like I distinctly remember, like, this is not working. It's making it worse. And I think by the time that my grandmother was heading towards death, she was literally taking like somewhere between 17 to 20 pharmaceuticals a day, right? And that just the pain and suffering that I watched her go through, tremendous. The pain and suffering I watched my mother go through, I mean, honestly, shaped me, right? I mean, I don't get to this place in my life without those. And as a young child, for myself personally, growing up in such a traumatic household with a drug addict, alcoholic mother, an alcoholic, abusive stepfather, never meeting my father, having a learning disability, all of these things, and I'm labeled one of these kids who needs to be in the special classes, who has anger issues and emotional dysregulation. And I'm like, yeah, no shit, look where I come from. And the solution was, and unfortunately still is, let's medicate. And at super young age, I was taking psychoactive medications to try to regulate my brain that were making me legitimately even more crazy.
Right.
Like I remember being 9, 10 years old and having brutal insomnia and going to do sleep studies. And people are like, we don't know why you can't sleep. I'm like, I can probably guess. And so you look at this and we're like, all right, so the game that we're playing here is solving for X. X, I believe in this scenario, what we're talking about, like how do you create this path to actually heal people at the root is such a hard problem to solve when you're facing, I think, two things. One, a giant media propaganda, and two, a pharmaceutical industry that is not governed in any capacity. And so all we see on television is ads. Take this pill. Your life sucks. Take this pill. Makes your life better. Take this pill. And you and I both know that's not the thing. We're so tied to the quick fix though, right? We're so tied into this idea that if we just do this one thing, everything gets better. But all of the research and data consistently shows things like SSRIs do not work in comparison to a placebo, in comparison to exercise. We see depression medications actually cause more suicidal ideations. We see all of these things happening. But I have to tell you, Dan, I think people just, it's not even necessarily that they're uneducated. And I think that'd be unfair to say. I just think people have given up. And I don't know how to help move them through that. So when we have this conversation, I guess really my first thought, my first question around that is like, do you feel the same way? And if that's true, how do we intervene?
Well, I think part of it is that when you look at models that are intended to help, no model ever looks at the whole person. Like it's so interesting that we just look at bits and pieces, and people go to the doctor even though the data tells us in which study you look at, 85 up percent of issues medical have a stress component, but the
Mm,
doctors aren't talking about stress. Like they're not talking about the way that people live their lives and how that contributes to a problem. So I just think everybody's like in their own lane. I remember years ago meeting this child. It wasn't even related to work. It was at church. And she was little, like she was like 2, and her skin was like kind of peeling off, like horrible eczema and all this. And I didn't know them, so I didn't have any liberty to ask questions. I just kept noticing. And her sisters would say, Miss Dana, please pray for our sister. Please pray for our sister. She's sick. And finally, I just asked one of the children, I'm like, what do you mean sick? And they just said, oh, well, her skin hurts and she can't go to the potty. And they just start listing all these things. So finally, I get my nerve up and walk up to these people I don't know, introduce myself and say, your other daughters told me that your little girl is sick. I would love to talk to you. And the mom looked at me kind of puzzled and said, aren't you a counselor? I said, I am, but I know a lot about physical health. And I said, why don't y'all just come and talk to me? And I said, there's no charge, no strings. You don't have to do anything. Let's just talk and see if maybe I have anything to offer. And when they came in, they began to share that this child had multiple doctors, like 5 or 6 different doctors that never communicated with one another. Like none of them did. And one of them were saying they thought she might have cancer, and another one was saying this. And these parents were young and uneducated and terrified. And I just started asking questions, and they didn't the child drank very little water. They ate a lot of processed food in the home, and they were not bad people. They were wonderful people that had no grid for change. And so I just said, well, would you be able to make these changes for her? And I'm telling you, the things I offered up were very common sense. Let's just get away from everything but real food, fruits, vegetables, meat, and water. And let's avoid those big triggers, dairy and gluten. Let's do this, let's do that. And identified a few things that would be safe to start dealing with her extreme constipation. And I gave them my phone number. And I said, if you have questions or concerns, call me. And they're like, can we get off of this medication? I said, well, I'm not a doctor, so I can't advise that, but you're her parents. So you have a right to do anything you want. So call your pharmacist, call your doctor, find a medical person that will support you reducing this medication. Well, to make a very long story short or shorter, they just made those changes, and she started going to the bathroom, and her skin cleared up, and they got her off all that medication. And this is just over a period of months. I just met with them once a month, and we would just talk through things and continue to encourage them. And like she was well. But that's all we did. All we did was just deal with something that I can't imagine, that you have 5 doctors and nobody says drink water, eat fruits and vegetables, avoid processed foods. Like, why would that not be a common sense approach to every problem? But we're skipping that. It just lacked common sense that we skip things that are easy to do. I mean, maybe easy is too big of a word. Maybe that are simple in nature. That if you choose to do it, you can. Yet we sit back and we ignore things that could make a huge difference.
yeah. And I think that part of that is looking at You've probably seen the studies where people are more likely to finish a round of antibiotics when giving it to their animal versus than giving it to themselves when they're
Hmm.
sick, right? I think there's something about human nature where we often will give more for others and other entities than even
Right.
for ourselves. And I think that that's one of those things where it's like, okay, well, how do you get to the place to care about yourself enough to do the thing that you know will make you better? Right? I think
Right.
there's an odd addiction that we have to our own suffering. I mean, I'll give you a great example. Just personally, in my 20s, I smoked cigarettes, and I watched my grandmother develop emphysema and COPD. I watched my uncle just not be able to breathe ever, and they're on oxygen machines. I mean, all of my friends smoked. We would go to bars and party and smoke cigarettes, and there were times where I couldn't breathe. And Dana, here's the craziest part of all of this. I grew up with asthma. In fact, I had such a bad asthma attack at 8 years old, I coded. And you think about this and you're like, okay, well, what drives a person who quote unquote knows better
Right.
to still do the thing that causes self-harm? Because I look at that, I go, that's self-harm. That's the same guise as cutting. That's how I look
Hmm.
at it, right? Now, I'm not a doctor, so I can't diagnose anyone, just like anyone else can for that matter. But I look at that and I think to myself, well, why do people so easily give up on themselves? Right? We know the thing, right? And so if the thing we're trying to address here is, well, how do we get people to do the simple thing, which I think comes down to like love thyself, right?
Right.
Effectively is what it is. There's a disconnect there. I mean, there certainly was for me. It took deep inner work and learning that not smoking and doing drugs and all that stuff was not only a sense of self-love, but self-respect. And I realized like a lot of times people aren't taught respect for self, especially people listen to this show because we're trauma survivors. Generally, most people listen to this show at an adverse childhood experience, right? So we learn not to respect ourselves through the experiences that we have. And then on this other side, now you're trying to live life as this person who has ill-informed information about what love and respect means. So how do we bridge that gap, right? Because yes, it's simple. And yes, that family, amazing. I'm so glad they helped their child. But my question is like, well, would they have done it for themselves? And then how do we get people to do that for
Right.
themselves? Like how do you bridge that gap?
Well, if you want to get real practical, we can talk about like the nervous system. I think sometimes people are self-destructive because they're internally unorganized. When what's going on inside of you is so disorganized that you can't manage the basics of life, like going to the grocery store and buying good food or having relationships that are healthy and strong and being able to recognize your own needs and ask for them to be met as while you meet the needs of others. Like all of life flows from what's inside. You cannot give away what you don't have. Like if it's not within you, then what do we do for that? And a lot of that is that practical piece of resetting that nervous system and beginning to do all the things that we need to do so that the body and the soul, that mind, will, and emotions, there's enough health there that we're able to make ourselves do the right things, because dysregulation leads to a disorganized, unproductive life.
I agree. And that's why when I look at my life at 25 years old, I was 350 pounds, smoking two packs, drinking myself to sleep all the time. And I look at the lives of many of the people that I've coached over the years. They come in and yeah, they're completely dysregulated. They don't know up from down. Circadian rhythm's a mess. Diet's a mess. Physical fitness is a mess. All adrenal systems are, everything's a complete mess, right? And there is something interesting that you said, like being self-destructive is kind of the cornerstone of an internally unorganized system. That rings very true to me. So then the question becomes, well, if the process to end self-destruction is to internally organize, how do you reset your nervous system to get to the place where you're creating a frame that has a space to actually heal? because we have so many conversations, we hear so many things about nervous system, vagus nerve, this, blah, 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 that. Like, what is it? If somebody came to you, let's say someone's listening right now and they know they are a complete mess. Just everything is not working. And they've tried the talk therapy, they've tried, some meds, they've listened to some podcasts, they've read some books. They maybe even have gone to a couple of retreats and nothing has changed. Their life is still status quo. 3, 4, 5 years in, countless hours invested, unbelievable amount of money invested, and they're still sitting here. Nothing is working. Where do we begin with them? How do we get a reset that gives them the space to actually internally organize to end the cycle of self-destruction?
So I kind of see it, if you want to see their life like a teeter-totter, and it's like the left side of the teeter-totter is down, and this is where we don't want to be. Whatever this is addiction, this is fear, this is anxiety, it is insomnia, all of these things. And the right side is where we want to be. This is like this life that we think, this is what I desire. I want to have love and give love, and I want to have joy, and I want to have peace, and I want to make money, and I want to do all these things. How do we get from here to here? Well, I think that it's never one thing. It's a lot of things. We've got to get enough stuff on the right side of the teeter-totter to tip it over. And yes, it's all that practical stuff that I've been talking about, just like the simple things. People say things like, I just don't understand why I'm having these panic attacks. And then as I just begin to talk to them, I realize that they drink 3 Monster drinks a day. That's crazy. Like, that is just the definition of crazy, to give yourself enough caffeine that people sometimes have heart attacks drinking Monster drinks, but you don't understand why you have a panic attack. And when I say, are you willing to get rid of the Monster drinks and add some water? They're like, like, you're not? And, that's astounding to me, because they were like, well, I was just hoping that you would be able to help me. I said, I'm helping you right now. As we speak, there are lots of things we're going to do, but the first thing we need to do is change the obvious things. But these series of things that we begin to change our lives, but we have to do them consistently and persistently, but not so fast that we give up. Because it took me a while to learn. When I met people, I would think of this list of things they needed to do, and I had these great note cards, and I would make notes for them of the things they needed to do this week. And I would be like, this is going to be so great. And then sometimes, and I would just be so excited because I'm like, just 6 weeks of this and they're going to be a lot better. And they wouldn't come back. And I'm like, why didn't they come back? And what I realized is I overwhelmed them. It's like I may have 50 good ideas, and I may just need to give 2. And then we need to get good at the 2, and then we need to add a 3rd and a 4th. But if I want to say what is my favorite tool for resetting the nervous system, it's biofeedback. That is what I've done in conjunction with my counseling for the last 25 years. And the glory of biofeedback is it begins the reset without the participation of the person. I mean, obviously they have to show up. They have to sit in front of the computer. They have to do something, but they don't have to want it to work, and they don't have to do anything past being present for it to begin the work, because it doesn't work on the brain at a conscious level. It works at a subconscious level. So it's like when you wake up in the morning, you don't think, how many times does my heart need to beat today? How many respirations do I need to have, in terms of lung function? And like, that's the part of the brain we're dealing with. So where the brain is living in a state of there is a hurricane coming, and they're constantly like, hypervigilant. There's a hurricane coming. They sleep knowing it's coming. They wake knowing it's coming. They take care of their children knowing it's coming. But in reality, most of the time, it's just sprinkling. There's just not much going on. Yet we're living in this hypervigilant state. Biofeedback is the best tool I have ever seen to grab a hold of that, show the brain how to do something different, and get it to a point that it could do it independent of me or biofeedback. So that's my short answer. Big fix is biofeedback.
Okay. I want to define biofeedback because I know we have people listening who have no idea what you're talking about. But before I do that, so guys, stay with me for a minute. Before I do that, there's just this question of curiosity that's just at like the tip of my brain. Would you have these people come in and they sit with you and the space of overwhelm is created, even though we can see the path? The difficulty in those first steps is often the most overwhelming thing because it's so unknown. And our brains, we really balk against the idea of the unknown. We don't want
Yeah.
that, right? Because we're always trying to keep ourselves safe. And so the question that I came up with here in this moment is, do people actually just fear the reset? Right? Because we think about this idea of identity, right? Because so much of like who you become is based on the things that you do. You are habit. There's just no way around it. You show me someone's habit, I'll tell you who they are. But I believe that what I've seen, because it's just I've spent so much time with people helping them navigate things like this. And there's something about that letting go of the identity of the person you are to become the person that you want to be. Do you see that too? Do you think fear is the thing that keeps people from the first steps of that reset?
I think that fear is huge. I think that the hell we know is less scary than the potential of something good. I've seen that for years, and I just call it out. Like at the end of session one, if I feel that is present in the room, I look at them and I say, "You're not going to want to come back here next week. So I need you
Hmm.
to know that if you do, I can help you. Like I can help you do this. I will not push you past where you can go. I will honor the rate and the pace that you want to go at. But if you don't come back a year from now, you're still going to be where you are now. And clearly you don't want to be here because you're here. So I really hope to see you next week. Would you be willing to give me a commitment that you would give me one more week?" And I've never had anybody that I said that to deny me that. They're like, "Yeah, I can come back next week." And I'm like, "Great. I'll see you next week." And because I say it out loud and talk about it, I feel like I decrease the fear because I identified, I know what you're feeling right now. I know this must be really scary, but I am able to help you and you are not alone. I will stand with you as long as needed, but you'll be surprised how quickly you're able to stand all by yourself. And
Hmm.
letting people understand that is, I think, such a relief to them. And I've had people years later say, "I remember the first day I met you." And I'm like, "Oh, I don't." Like, well, what was it like? And because, people will come and go. People will come and see me for a while and they'll leave and then because we all have our threshold on how much we want to grow right now. I've just seen that because I'll
Hmm.
feel like we're just beginning. We're 5 months in, and I'll just see all this progress in people, and I'm like, wow. And I have this internal agenda of what might be helpful for this person, and they're like, "I just wanted to tell you how much you've helped me." And then I realized like, oh, they're leaving. And I'm like, okay, and they tell me all the things that they've learned and how much better their life is. And I just tell them how proud I am of them, and they leave. But then years later, they call me and say, "Hey, I need to work on some stuff. Can I come back?" And then the same things I knew we needed to work on when they left are right there on the surface and they're ready. And we all have to go at a pace that we can tolerate.
That's a great point. Yeah, I think that's so true. And it does ebb and flow because, when I look back at the beginning of my journey, it was full on dedication. I mean, it was literally a full-time job. to go to therapy, to go to coaching, to work on physical fitness, to be in seminars and journaling and meditating and just always learning and always in CBT this, NLP that, ABC that, right? And
Mhm.
then there's spaces of time where it's like a year will go by and I'm like, I'm good. I just don't need to deal with it, or maybe I don't want to deal with it. And
Right.
then there's spaces where it comes back and I'm like, oh yeah, let's go get into this. So I think that's a great point. And I always try to explain to people, at least the way that I see it, when you sign the dotted line to walk this journey, healing's it's like a rest of your life thing. I
Right.
mean, Dana, there's shit that comes up for me sometimes where I'm like, man, I thought I was done with this, right? And it'll pop up. And then there's times where I go, man, I haven't dealt with that in 10 years. Wow, I completely forgot that impacted my life. And I know that more things will come.
Right.
Biofeedback is so interesting to me because I don't think it's well known. I don't think it's well versed in the mental health space, especially not in the ways that it could and should be. I think that's because it's generally speaking, it's not a pill and it's not, hey, let's go make billions of dollars off of people suffering. But I do think it's very important. It's something that I've experienced and that I've used in my life. And I would love, before we go into the depths of it, because I definitely have more questions, hit us with the high level. Explain to us, what is biofeedback? What does it do? How do you do it? And how does it impact someone's life for the better?
So I'll just start with what it looks like.
Great.
There is a client chair, just a comfortable, relaxing chair. They get in, put their feet up, and they sit in front of a screen. And then I sit in front of a screen, and both of our screens are connected to the same computer. And then we also have something connected to that called an amp. An amp is basically where the electrodes are connected, and the electrodes are going to be hooked to the head. And let me say this. There are lots of kinds of biofeedback. Biofeedback's the most common word, and it's kind of an umbrella word. Like biofeedback is any way you give your body information about itself. So there can be like heart rate variability, there can be skin temperature, there can be a lot of different ways we give the body information about itself. What we do more specifically is called neurofeedback, which means giving the brain information about itself. So the way we do that is based upon the interview information and what we learn about the client. We put the electrodes on the head, and I'm going to talk about the way it used to look because I feel like it makes more sense in terms of what we see. The technology has come so far that now it's not as obvious what we're doing. 25 years ago, but there was 3 seconds between what the brain did and the feedback on the screen. Now there's 300ths of a second. So it's like now it's a more fluid process that's more enjoyable, works faster. You know, years ago I would tell people, give me 10 sessions and I'll show you progress. People leave after the first session and they're like, I don't understand how I feel different. I was only here for a little bit. And so it's like it begins to shift things very quickly at the way we do it now. But I think the way it used to look gives people more of an idea. So the old way of looking at it, there was a game, and it was like the old Pac-Man game. I don't know at what point that this picture is going to wear out on me because people aren't going to know what Pac-Man is, but most people still know. So there was a Pac-Man game. The electrodes are on your head. Nothing goes into the brain. The electrodes are on your head simply to pull that raw EEG out and move it to my screen. That's what, so the computer has something to work with. When the brain was doing what the computer was asking for, the Pac-Man moved and ate the dots, and there were beeps. Every dot was a beep. So beep, 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 beep. Every one of those beeps is like a yes. Like the brain is doing what we're asking for. So the system's saying, good job, good job, good job. Yes, yes, yes. Then the brain makes some frequency that is not productive. Say the frequency relates to lack of focus or anxiety. It's an unproductive frequency. So the Pac-Man turns black and waits. And it doesn't have to wait long because the brain wants the yeses, not the nos. So that no is like, no, don't do that. So the brain stops doing that, moves back into the more productive activity, and the Pac-Man moves on. Yes, 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 yes. So they spend their whole biofeedback time getting a series of yeses and nos. If you can, it's just like you can learn to ride a bike or you can learn to play the piano or any other task. Your brain can learn to function differently, and it is smart. It innately knows when you have shown it something better than what it's doing. And over time, with a series of steps, you will produce a brain that is calmer and more productive. Another analogy I like to use is that the masses of people's brains idle too high, like a car. It's like their brain is revved all the time. And so you've got this idle point that's so high, and then life happens. It can be just the simplest of things happen. Your car breaks down, you get a flat tire, your kid makes a bad grade, something happens, or it can be a big event. My husband says, I want a divorce. All of these complex things are happening, and there's no space for them because you're idling so high that the things happen and you can't function. And that's where people have what they categorize as a nervous breakdown, or they fall apart, or they wind up blowing their life up, or maybe they just can't function. Their head hurts all the time, their back hurts, their neck hurts. So biofeedback brings your idle point back in line. It pulls it low and it leaves space for life. Because if you're not out of control all the time, when something happens, you're able to think, I don't like this. I hate that I have a flat tire. But it's not the end of the world. I'll take my tire and get it fixed and put it, all the steps that you have to do to get yourself back in line. You have space for that because now you're living your life from a place that is calmer and more organized.
How does this, I can visualize it. Well, I've done it, so I understand it. But the visualization you just laid out is great because I think that really helps people understand the process that's taking place. From a neurological perspective, what's happening deeper? Like when we really look at the connections and the synapses and the way things are firing, one, what is the feedback looking for? And then two, what are the changes that are being created in the process?
So I feel like that's it's a great question, but I'll tell you that even in the field, depending on who you ask, different people tell you different things are happening.
Mm-hmm.
Because there was all these speculations about things, and I would think that's not what we're doing. But obviously I didn't know. Like, I can't see what's going on inside of somebody's brain. It's interesting too that some brain waves look really dysregulated, like right on the screen, but the person doesn't have a lot of symptomology of the dysregulation that I'm looking at. Their life is pretty organized. Things are together. They're able to maintain work and marriage and family, and they seem relatively happy. And they're here for I wish I could sleep a little better. And then you have somebody who's extremely dysregulated, and sometimes their brain matches that. Other times it doesn't. Other times the activity I'm looking at is what I would classify as normal. It's like there's nothing that I see. What I figured out that our approach is symptom driven. So I want to know, what are we working on? And I have lots of ways of figuring out where are our focus points. And then I'm going to write those down, and we are going to discuss these symptoms every week. And like a common set of symptoms might be and symptoms meaning if you had a goal of what you would like to be different when you left, after you're through seeing me, what are those goals? And we might be looking at insomnia or depression or anxiety or anger or lack of focus or lack of joy. Different people have a lot of different things: pain, tension in the body, PTSD symptoms, the symptoms related to their traumatic brain injury. Like whatever their goals are, every time they return to me, I'm going to pull those goals out and say, okay, so what did we do in relation to this week? What did we do That is the best method I have ever found, because clearly if we're meeting their goals, we're changing something inside the brain. The places where I get super intrigued are like, so you have a child or an adolescent that is just on fire. Like they are committing crimes, they are hurting adults, they've had 17 placements in the last 6 months, they've been inpatient 17 out of 24 months. Like, so you look at this system and you're like, where do we start? You know, I can promise you where we start isn't talk therapy. Like there are many, many things we will not talk better. Many things. I've had those kind of kids that eventually I have to try to help them deal with the trauma they experienced from their care for trauma. Like they experience trauma while they're incarcerated in an inpatient facility with other children who are dysregulated, being forced to take medication that makes them feel bad. Like it's difficult. But if I can get them in that biofeedback chair and get them doing biofeedback multiple times quickly, all of a sudden I just begin to see the child or the adolescent like they're there again. And it feels miraculous. It's such a beautiful thing to see somebody who was lost, literally inside of themselves. They are lost. Who wants to live a life of hitting people and everybody being mad at you and people forcing you to move from? Nobody would choose that. The number of times I've heard, oh, he's really a bad kid. And I'm like, no, we are a bad society. Like we did this to this child. And now we're blaming this child or this adolescent for things that are not their own. And you'll never convince me that our adults that are imprisoned now didn't just start where these kids are. I know there is responsibility. I do not negate the fact that people have responsibility for their actions, that we have to do something. I don't. But I think the things we're doing are a fail. And we need to look at what we're doing and what we can do differently. And biofeedback is the best thing I have ever seen, because I promise you, it would have taken years and years of not therapy, but of a loving, caring adult being willing to live with these children while these children tore the house down. And where biofeedback can jump into that gap and say, we're going to calm you down so you can be loved, so you can learn to love, because that's the core of this, is attachment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's actually where I wanted to go next, because I look at my experience. I don't speak of my siblings' experiences publicly, but they've also, we grew up in the same house, right?
Right.
And I look at the journey that I've personally had to have, and seeing their journey be slightly skewed or different than mine, but all still kind of tied into the same experience. I mean, how do you not have abandonment issues? How do you not have attachment issues? How do you not have self-worth issues? How do you not, believe that love is real? How do you not, all of these things when you grow up in these environments, like many of your children that you've worked with have, like many of the people listening to this show have. I mean, I did a rough estimate because I can't know for sure, but between 8 to 12 years old, I lived with like 30 different families.
Mm-hmm.
And there were moments where my mom would disappear. I literally lived by myself in an abandoned house for 6 weeks at 11 years old, right? And so I think about all of these experiences that led to this place. At 25, I had a complete breakdown. Like there is just no way around it. I was not a functioning human. 5 panic attacks a day, couldn't think straight. I couldn't drive. My business was failing. Relationship was completely done. Health was trash. Nothing was working. And this is one of those things that I wish I would have had access to much sooner. Now, obviously I didn't, so it is what it is, but I see the efficacy in this because the reality is we are cleaning up messes that other people made as trauma survivors. Like that's just the truth of it. I'll never forget this. I sat down with my therapist one night years ago. This is probably 8, 9 years ago. And I look at him, I go, dude, I am so tired of looking at your fucking face every week. And it was a true statement because I was just like, I'm in here cleaning up other people's mess. And that's a huge responsibility for people without cause. If I did it myself, I wouldn't mind so much. And trust me, the fucking messes I've made that I've had to clean up personally, they're way easier to clean up than messes from adolescence and childhood. And so I sit and I think about this, all right, well, if the goal is what? Well, the goal is to fix the idea and the notion of whether or not you're lovable, whether or not you deserve companionship, whether or not you are capable of attaching and having a restored relationship with yourself, with other people, with an intimate partner, with a potential husband or wife, with even your own children. Why does this work? Why does this help people solve attachment problems?
Well, because it begins to heal the parts of the brain that prevent attachment. Like it's like when the brain is at a level of dysregulation that that it can't calm itself. It can't reset itself. When you calm all that down, I don't think biofeedback in isolation would necessarily give you that 100% that I desire. Because we also need to understand that we need human connection and what that looks like. And we need caring people in our lives that are willing to go there with us and to provide that physical contact and connection and love and tolerance for the learning process of how do you love and how do you heal and what do you do. But I believe that biofeedback is like the foundation that allows all that growth to happen because it calms things down. While you're on fire, you can't live. The brain is very smart in that if my life is in danger, or even if I think my life is in danger, I've had a lot of families say, I don't understand this. We are safe. We love them. We have, they are safe. It doesn't matter if you're safe if you don't feel like you're safe. Felt safety is a
That's
real
exactly
thing.
right.
Yeah, and
Yes.
without felt safety, and if you think about the, the brain believes all that happened, like everything that happens in your life, it happened, and the brain knows it happened, and oftentimes the brain is saying, I'm going to protect you. I will protect you from all these bad things. So whenever something arrives that reminds the brain of a previous event, then the brain starts going alert, 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 even though it's like, oh, you have a child that was molested their whole life. And then they grow up, they find themselves a decent, kind person and they get married, and then they're like, okay, I'm going to have sex now. And their brain's screaming at them, this is bad. Don't do it. The brain is not trying to ruin their wedding night. The brain is saying, you remember when this happened before. So the brain doesn't differentiate in last year, last month, a decade ago, and today when there's all that trauma. So we have to calm the system down so we can begin to be able to live our life not under the weight of that trauma.
Yeah, I mean that's so true. I look at and the sexual abuse is such a great example because you have so many people who to say that they fear intimacy in a sexual capacity would be a massive understatement.
Right.
And I think that it's one of those realities that people don't truly understand. And then what's even more difficult is the idea of expressing that to your intimate partner is often shaded with tremendous sense of shame and guilt.
Right.
And so it's like people are like, okay, well, how do I navigate being attached to someone when I fear the very thing that in reality brings people closest together, right? And it's like, well, you can't if you're completely dysregulated. It will never happen. That was an experience that I actually had in my early 30s because I kept trying to figure out, Well, because it can go the opposite way too, which I did, which I've talked about openly, where it's just like, I'm going to chase every human possible.
Right.
Let's hook up as much as possible. My idea of intimacy and love is a number, it's not a person. And then it was like, okay, well, where does that come from? Oh, well, sexual abuse as a child leads down the path where the fear of intimacy is this giant wall and border from true human connection, but sex is fine because it feels good, right? And so it's wild. Whether we're talking about this or we're talking about the ability to pair bond or we're talking about just the ability to put on your shoes and go outside, all of it to create a shift and a change, it really does stem from you have to get regulated. There's no way around it. And getting regulated can be massively difficult because for a lot of us, we've never had that. I will never forget. Like I remember I was in this place called Koh Samui, Thailand 10 years ago. 9 years ago. And I'm on a ferry. And I'm on this ferry from Koh Samui over to Koh Phangan. It's like a 45-minute ferry ride. And it was the most calm I've ever been, the most peace I've ever felt, the most regulated I've ever been, because all I was doing was yoga and meditation and Muay Thai and working and just enjoying life. And I had this moment on this ferry where suddenly, and I didn't understand it in the moment, I understood it a day or two later, I started crying. And like, I was like, what the fuck am I crying for? And I realized it was because I was happy. And until that moment, I never, when I would see people happy cry, I'd be like, you are so full of shit right now. This is not a thing. Like people don't do that. But because I got regulated, I was able to access this deeper sense of emotion.
Mhm.
And my hope and my encouragement, and the reason why I share that story is because as someone who is as deeply dysregulated as I was, can get to the place where regulation can exist, even if it's just in pockets sometimes. But hell, that's better than nothing. Like I know that this is super feasible for people. What are some of the more common reasons why people are coming to you? I want to really create a frame so everybody understands like what you're an expert at. Like what are three, four, five of the key points, key reasons why people are coming to you? What is that they're expecting of you, and what is it deeper in the work that you're doing with them?
Well, I think that when you live in a small town, um, you become a jack of many, many trades because, it's like if you live in Dallas, you can say, I treat women with anxiety between 30 and 45, and you really might be able to make a living at that. But the glory of what I've been able to do is I've been able to do everything, and I love it. I might see a 3-year-old with behavioral problems followed by an 80-year-old that's that suffered a stroke, followed by somebody who has high levels of anxiety and panic, followed by somebody who is looking for pain management. So,
Mm.
I think we do really well with post-traumatic stress disorder, with behavioral problems. If you consider the brain, like what doesn't start in the brain? The answer to
True.
that is nothing. For 25 years, people have called and said, does biofeedback help with? I obviously can't make a promise on anything. Like I can't, it's like there are things that I've tried to do that I haven't succeeded, but I have succeeded a lot. Like we schedule over 1,000 appointments a month in our outpatient
Mm.
facility. And the mass of the people that come here because we do biofeedback. Because we all, we're doing it in conjunction with therapy. It's just a service that we offer in conjunction with therapy. So we kind of divide the time. But when you consider all the implications of what biofeedback can do, that I don't know anything else that can do it in the same way. And I have a lot of different tools and I like them. And I think that there are lots of ways to get to places, but biofeedback is just a core thing that does things more quickly in a way that is functional and allows for a quick improvement of quality of life.
It's beautiful. And quick is a key word. And I think that where the quick fix ideal of pharmaceuticals often lead us astray, I personally can speak as the quick fix. I mean, it's relative, obviously. I mean, I did a bunch of sessions, but the quick fix of walking down the path of something more holistic like this is real. And more so, it has longevity. And that's one of the things that we don't get out of the more, dare I say, traditional modalities that we're faced with as the idea of healing on the daily basis. I encourage people, I want them to seek out and reach you and connect with you and spend time with you and schedule an appointment and get on a plane or drive their car, wherever it takes to get there, because this is real work that really helps people and it's powerful. Before I ask you my last question, where can everybody find you? Where can they learn more?
Well, I have, like I said, I have a large private practice in Ada, Oklahoma, but I have a new program that is a more intensive program, a 9-week program that 6 weeks of it's at home. And then you have 2 weeks in person in Ada where you receive 5 months of biofeedback in 2 weeks. It is a rapid program that involves that and all kinds of other interventions that all together give you a massive reset of that nervous system, followed by an online program called Restore Plus. And that program is full of things for people who possibly couldn't travel to Ada, Oklahoma and do that. Obviously, you can't do biofeedback online, but that online platform is a gathering of all the practical information of what it takes to reset your own nervous system at home. So you're looking at the practical, the practical parts such as physical activity, and what about fascia and how trauma is stored in our fascia, and how would you work on that? And what do you do to restore your gut? Like, we haven't really touched on gut health at all, but your gut is more important than your brain. It is literally your second brain, and your mental health will be no better than your gut health. So Restore Plus is this continued opportunity to learn. And, we have live access to me and some other people on my team where we're answering questions and talking about applications for children and adults, and what about pain and what about PTSD. So I feel like we have something for everyone that is able to offer this place to start and then how to move forward. And the best place to find us is restoreofada.com, because that's our website. And from there, there's links to all our social media and all the other things that we have to offer.
Love it. Yeah. And guys, remember, if you go to thinkunbrokenpodcast.com and you look up Dana's episode, you'll find all of that information and all of those links in the show notes. And I highly encourage you to reach out. I mean, especially if there was something you heard today and you're like, I just want to find out. Because I'll tell you, for me, my journey started with pure curiosity. And sometimes that's all you need to have a huge leap and bound in the healing. My last question for you, my friend, what does it mean to you to be unbroken?
I feel like that we have a body, a soul, and a spirit. So, and my definition of soul is the mind, the will, and the emotions. And because we are 3 parts, we are always predominantly in one of the 3 parts. So for instance, some people are living from their body most of the time. And it's like, yes, they have a soul and they have these things and they have a spirit. But I think the place to live from is from spirit. And in my belief, it would be that the spirit is the place where the trauma hasn't touched. That our spirit part is who we were created to be before the trauma happened. Our spirit is where we are like God. Like, in our body and our soul, we have all of our wounds and all of our burdens. But from the spirit, we can live unbroken.
Mm. Beautifully said. I absolutely love that. I want to thank you so much for being here, Dana. Amazing conversation. Again, folks, I encourage you to go to the website and learn more. Thank you for listening. If this brought any value to you, share it with a friend. Somebody in your life very likely could use this episode and it may change their life forever. So you're also playing a role in their healing journey. Take care of yourself, take care of each other, and until next time, my friends, be unbroken. I'll see ya.
Thank you so much for listening to Think Unbroken. Please share this episode with someone who could use it and help us move forward in our mission of ending generational trauma in our lifetime. And if you would, please take 5 seconds to pop on iTunes or Spotify, hit that 5-star, leave a review, and you can also reach out to us on social at Michael Unbroken or at Think Unbroken. And of course, you can check out our YouTube channel at Think Unbroken. Thank you for being a part of Unbroken Nation, my friends, and until next time, be unbroken.